Let's take a few minutes here and just talk about some layer properties and how to manipulate them. What I've got now is just a background, and I'm going to draw on that background. I'm going to use the tool here that just allows me to draw a shape, and it's a pixelized shape, and it's going to be black. When I go in to erase this, I'm going to use the eraser tool here. Now, the eraser tool is not a tool I usually prefer to use, but it shows a point here. What happens is you're replacing the foreground color, or all the colors that may be on here, with the background color. That's all you're doing. Okay, now let's talk about layers. Let's create a new layer. Okay. I'm going to use this same tool that I used just a moment ago, the shape tool, and I'm going to make another shape. Let's change the color of this one a little bit here. Let's just go in and make it this reddish brown. Okay. If I go into here, I can also use my eraser tool to erase. I can also use my brush tool to go in, and let's just brush with some green here. I can also just paint green on this layer, and you can see that the layer that I've got is on a transparent base, and I'm using a Wacom tablet here, so I can get transparency in the painting that I do. The harder I bear down, the less transparent it is, but you can see I do have some transparency. All right. I can draw on this layer. Now, if I want to limit my drawing so that I don't paint outside the lines here, in other words, I can protect anything on this layer that is not transparent by locking the transparency. That's this little box right here that says, right next to the word lock. So now my transparency is locked on this layer. Now what does that mean? Well, that means that if I draw, and I'm going to start drawing outside the box, and I'm drawing with green, and you can see that this green is only painting inside the box. It's only working on the pixels that are not transparent. Now I can go in, let's take a different shade of green. Let's go with this brighter green up here. And you can see that even though I'm changing the color of green, it still works. Now what happens if I paint over this area here? Well, you can see that the brighter green is going over the original green that was there because that was not transparent. Okay, now let's create another layer. On this layer, I'm going to paint with red. And I'm going to come in and I'm just going to do some red painting here, and you can see that since I lightly pressed that I do have some transparency here, and I can paint over anything that I want. Now, one of the other things I can do with this layer is by clicking on my move tool, I can move this layer around, and I'm just moving the one layer. And actually, if I click on the other layer, I can move that layer around also. Now what happens if I don't want to move a layer? Well, let's take the layer with the brown box on it. We can go into there. We've already protected our transparency. I can also go in and click on this little double-headed arrow here, and now I can't move that layer. See, a box pops up and says the layer's locked. I can still move my other layer though. Now there's one other tool here where I can lock the painting ability, because right now if I come down onto this layer with the box on it and I want to do some more painting, let's just grab some more green. You can see here, let's use the brush tool, you can see here that I'm still painting. My transparency is still locked, but I am still painting there. If I lock the brush, that means I can no longer paint on that on that layer, and I get an error message that says you can't do it because the layer is blocked. Well, what I can do here is I can undo all of these, and I can just simply lock that layer. And now I can't paint on the layer, I can't move the layer, can't do anything with it. It is locked. It's in place. I can still move my other layer here, and I can still paint on it. Okay, let's make still another layer. This one, I'm going to go in and let's paint with some blues here. Okay, so I'll get my brush, and I'll just paint with some blue on there. Now you can see here that I can independently move my blue layer by using the move tool. I can move this layer too. The layer 1 is still locked, so I can't move it. Well, what happens if I want to keep these two layers, the red layer and the blue layer, if I want to keep them together? Well, I can do that a couple of ways. One thing I can do is I can hold my Shift key down and select both of these layers. And now when I want to move, you can see both of the layers move together. I can still go in and I can paint, but I can't paint on these layers because I have two of them selected. So I can still go in and let's just select this one layer. I can still paint on that layer. That's my blue layer. Okay, I can still paint on there, but I can't paint on the other one while that one is selected. That's normal layer. Okay. If I select these two layers, and I always want to keep them relatively positioned, I don't want to change their position with respect to each other, I can link them. And the way to link them is to go down to the bottom here, and you see this little chain. And if I click on that, you see I have these two links. Now that means that if I have my move tool selected, these two layers will always move together. They move independently of, well, this layer is locked, so it doesn't move at all. But if I unlock that layer, you can see that this layer moves independently of these other two layers. Now, when you get to a point where you have a lot of layers out there, what you may want to do is clean up your layer stack by putting certain layers that belong together in a layer group. And the way you create a group is you go down to the bottom of the layers panel and just click on the group icon. It looks like a little folder. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this group. I just double clicked on it to highlight it. I'm going to call it blue-red. Okay? And now I can take these two layers, and what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to unlink these layers before I do anything with them. I'm going to unlink them, and I'm going to drag these two layers into the group. And now I can close this group, and you can see I've got blue-red. Now, when I have this group selected, it acts like these two layers are linked together because now they move together. But if I open the group, I can select one and just move it by itself, and then by selecting the group again, I can move them together. So this is just a few ways of protecting your images so that you can't move them if you don't want to, that you can't write in transparent areas if you don't want to, and you can group layers together to make your layer stack cleaner. And you also have the benefit of being able to move those groups as if they were just one layer.